We can have all these measures in place, but if they're not implemented in a way that is effective and preventing harm, what's the point of them?
One woman is killed by an intimate partner on average every 8 days in Australia, according to national crime data. Meanwhile, there's been an 8% increase in family and domestic violence offenders overall, according to the Australian Bureau of Statistics. The 97,800 family and domestic violence offenders prosecuted by police in the 2024-2025 financial year was 7,103 more than the previous financial year, according to the ABS Head of Crime and Justice Statistics, Samantha Hall. Breaking that down, Hall suggests that there are 403 family and domestic violence offenders for every 100,000 people in Australia, and the majority of victims are women. In some cases, domestic violence can lead to fatal consequences. Over the years, cases such as the deaths of Hannah Clark, Alison Baden-Clay, Lily James, Kelly Wilkinson, and Karen Ristevsky have put the issue of domestic violence in the spotlight. Since 1989 and 1990, there's been an average of 49 female victims of intimate partner homicide each year. And in some cases, there was a history of domestic violence and even breaches of apprehended violence orders, or AVOs, and yet the women still ended up dead. So it begs the question, is enough being done to protect women in Australia? There is currently no nationally consistent legislative definition of family and domestic violence. There is, however, the National Domestic Violence Order Scheme in place, meaning since November 25, 2017, all domestic violence orders issued in any single Australian jurisdiction, i.e. state or territory, are automatically recognised and enforceable across the country. Like many crimes in Australia, family and domestic violence is a state responsibility for state governments, their police and court systems to deal with it. So in New South Wales, for example, in November last year, the New South Wales government passed legislation that raised the standard non-parole period for killing an intimate partner, whether current or former, from 20 years to 25.
We should see that the sentence, both the head sentence and the non-parole sentence, will increase. It doesn't mean that it will be a non-parole period of 25 years for all people who kill their intimate partner. This is the guide for the judges, and the judges will look at all of those factors, and so you still might get a non-parole period that is lower than that.
The Northern Territory also introduced a stronger penalty for domestic violence murders this year. Under the new legislation, the non-paroled period for murder cases involving domestic violence was extended from 20 years to 25. But does the threat of stronger penalties, if caught, stop people from actually committing such violent crimes? UTS Faculty of Law Associate Professor Dr. Jane Wangman said research on deterrence and whether tougher sentences actually deter someone from committing the same crimes is kind of not there.
What we know about deterrence, it only kind of works if offenders really know that that's what the sentence is and that they're likely to get caught. And I'm talking about deterrence generally, but it also assumes that offenders are being very rational about their decision making to deter them from doing something.
While individual laws and prosecutions fall on the state, there is no doubt that family and domestic violence is a national problem. The Department of Social Services has created the National Plan to End Violence Against Women and Children 2022 to 2032. The plan is a 10-year overarching national policy framework that will guide actions towards ending violence against women and children in one generation. The plan focuses on prevention, early intervention, response and recovery, and healing. It's also committed to develop a plan for First Nations family safety, which I will get to later. But almost halfway through the 10-year plan, are we seeing any changes? According to the Australian Institute of Criminology, the number of intimate partner homicides perpetrated against a female victim decreased by 16 incidents between 2024 to 2025 compared with 2023 to 2024. While some would argue that more prosecutions is a result of greater awareness and more victims willing to speak out rather than suffer in silence, the simple fact remains that these offences are still happening. Domestic violence survivor and advocate Jo Cooper believes even with greater awareness and greater effort to combat the problem, it is still not doing enough.
If you just look at the facts, funding has increased, research has increased, the sector has increased, but people are still dying at an alarming rate. what are we celebrating? When the government speak of domestic violence, they reference it as a national crisis. So to me, that means we need national resolve. We need national reform. We're not seeing that. And so what that tells me is we actually have a system design crisis.
She emphasises that it's about outcome, not progress.
We don't need awareness. People are aware. I think awareness is, it's there. We see a headline nearly every week. We see a story of tragedy and families being torn apart every week. I don't think funding into awareness is really necessary.
Despite rising awareness of the critical issue, Jane said that most women don't report to the police.
It's such an indictment that that is what someone would be prepared to live with, because approaching the police would be worse.
She said a lot of women will seek support from other services instead of the police, including their GP and family and friends.
We get more women than I'd care to mention come here than rather than go to the police. And that is a problem in itself.
Ashley Donoghue is the CEO of the Mudgingall Aboriginal Women's Corporation, a drop-in centre for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women. It is the only such centre in metropolitan Sydney that's 100% run by Aboriginal women for Aboriginal women.
We don't have a criteria. Any Aboriginal and or Torres Strait Islander woman come and buzz on our door. We do our very best to service, advocate for and help.
According to the Australian Institute of Criminology, in 2023 to 2024, Indigenous women experience an intimate partner homicide victimisation rate 2 to 7 times greater than the rate for all Australian women. Most First Nations victims were women killed by an intimate partner, and almost 9 in 10 primary homicide victims were killed by a First Nations offender. This increases to 41 times more likely in regional and very remote communities. However, Ashley said that Australia faces a problem not just of male-dominated violence, but also systemic violence perpetrated against Aboriginal women.
And I'm not saying that all men are perpetrators of violence against Aboriginal women, because Aboriginal women have different nationality partners, but the men that were spoken about in this instance were Aboriginal men, and the fear of having them incarcerated and the fear of death in custody is a real thing for Aboriginal women. But we need to change that narrative. Aboriginal women, we've been the protectors for so long, but we don't put ourselves first to be protected. And so the narrative has to change around that, because that's a real fear, but so it's a real fear that our women are being murdered by our men at an alarming rate.
For Aboriginal people, Ashley said that domestic violence becomes even more difficult as perpetrators will often go back to their community.
And so is that woman supposed to leave her family and community? You know what I mean? So, you know, that there's so many barriers, and I say it time and time again in this space. All the laws, regulations and rules and plans that they make are seen through a middle-class white lens, which does not see Aboriginal women.
In early February, a new $220 million plan to address domestic violence committed against First Nations women and children was co-designed with and developed by Indigenous people and federal and state governments, the first of its kind. The 10-year roadmap called Our Ways, Strong Ways, Our Voices will include crisis response teams, including mobile teams in remote areas, emergency accommodation, therapeutic support, and behaviour change and education programs. But Ashley expressed her concern on how the funding will be split to only 40 community organisations.
That's my only gripe on it. You know, it seems like a lot of money, but it's Australia-wide. How many domestic violence services are Australia-wide? And they're only giving it to 40 of them. Do they choose what organisations they're going through, or is it a competition to get the funding? And if it is a competition to get the funding, who gets the most funding? Is it still going to the places that really need it?
Jo said that lived experience has to lead policy.
There's a hypervigilance that comes with navigating coercive control, abuse, violence in real time that no research will ever be able to really feel and understand. And so when you place weight on titles and accolades over lived experience, I don't see a way that we are going to turn the tide on domestic violence.
It's beyond important, it is essential. And if they don't have the lived experience, then they need to work beside somebody who does, that can advise them on that part. Because what we're seeing is a lot of academics writing these policies, writing these plans, who don't have the lived experience. And that's why they're failing.
Jane said the law can't prevent everything on its own.
But what it can do is be part of a whole package of things that we do in order to ensure people's safety. But what makes that law real is the professionals that do it. So the police that charge, whoever the bail authority is that makes the decision to grant bail, and the judge that does the sentence. So these are all people. And one of the things that we need to ask is how well we have provided all of those professionals with education and training to really understand domestic and family violence risk. So I kind of have questions about when we talk about risk, are we all talking about the same thing? Do we all really have the same kind of in-depth understanding about how domestic family violence might be different to risk that you might be considering in other types of assault matters?
Jo also said that people don't realise that housing policy is directly linked to domestic violence.
If you do not have a safe home, if you do not have financial stability, the risk of people returning back and putting up with a violent relationship is extremely high.
Jo has been at the forefront advocating for Clare's Law to exist beyond South Australia. Clare's Law, also known as the Domestic Violence Disclosure Scheme, is a police policy giving people the right to know if their current partner or ex-partner has any history of violence or abuse. The scheme is named by Clare Wood, who was murdered by her abusive ex-boyfriend in 2009. Clare's Law was formally rolled out in England and Wales in 2014. In Australia, it's only been implemented in South Australia. So why not nationally? Jo said the main pushbacks are concerns for privacy, vigilantism, and false security.
When it comes to Clare's Law, it would give individuals the right to know if their partner or potential partner has a history of violence. Why would you hold information like that when it's already working in South Australia? I don't understand. There is criticism, like I said, privacy, which it just doesn't fly. It doesn't make sense. And actually on privacy, why do we continuously care more about the privacy of abusers than the victims? That needs some serious answers, right? The other one is victims access Clare's Law or seek that information after abuse has already started. To me, that is so short-sighted and so ill-considered, because what that doesn't take into account is the fact that victim survivors go back. We know that. They return to abusive relationships. The manipulation that goes on in relationships of abuse and coercive control are very hard for people to understand if they haven't lived it. And seeking that information could simply mean the difference between returning and leaving for good. And so to criticise somebody for seeking that information after abuse has started is so embarrassing.
She has also petitioned both the New South Wales and federal governments to introduce and implement Clare's Law. The New South Wales petition exceeded the 20,000 needed signatures and was debated in Parliament, but was still turned down. The federal petition received over 133,000 signatures in 13 months, but the Federal Attorney General Michelle Rowland responded with this letter.
Under Australia's system of government, the primary responsibility for criminal matters rests with the states and territories, with each managing their own justice system and law enforcement agencies. As such, the establishment of a domestic violence disclosure scheme, also known as Clare's Law, is a matter for state and territory governments. A current priority of the Attorney General's Department to progress through this forum is a review of domestic violence order frameworks across all jurisdictions, including penalties, definitions, gaps and inconsistencies, as well as opportunities for improvements.
Honestly, my first reaction was, wow, a state issue. I do believe that it was deemed a national crisis. And she sent a letter that had no commitment. And I do respect that she fulfilled her professional and formal obligation, but honestly, we need leadership, and leadership requires moral obligation, and that's what we're not seeing at the moment, I believe.
Domestic violence against women is a scourge on Australian society. But as Jane said, one single piece of legislation can't solve everything, but rather it's part of a whole package.
You know, I know that we have to adhere to the rules and you know, the funding agreements and everything else, but why do we have to compete for money when we've proven that we've got the clientele, we've proven that there's a need here. They know that Aboriginal women are victims of domestic violence more than any other nationality in this country, and yet still it depends on if our trauma meets their white gaze.
We need to have what many deem as uncomfortable conversations. I just see them as honest conversations. If we can't be honest and say what we're doing right now is simply not working, how do we expect that we're going to improve it?
Domestic violence, sexual violence is unfortunately incredibly common in our society, and most of us know someone or are a person that it's happened to, and so responding effectively and in a warm way, if someone's reporting to you as a friend or whatever, it's just really important.